The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you.
Jesus said to his disciples, "Be watchful, be alert. You do not know when the time will come. It is like a man traveling abroad. He leaves home and places his servants in charge, each with his own work, and orders the gatekeeper to be on the watch. Watch, therefore. You do not know when the Lord of the house is coming, whether in the evening or at midnight or at cockcrow or in the morning. May he not come suddenly and find you sleeping. What I say to you, I say to all, watch." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus.
Until earlier this year, I was entirely unaware of an event in April called Take Your Kids to Work Day. Take Your Kids to Work Day. Now, as a lawyer, and probably more importantly as a coal miner's son, I immediately saw all sorts of problems with that kind of exercise. Our nation's capital, though, honored the occasion. White House press reporters were allowed to have their children accompany them and even ask questions on their behalf in White House press briefings. At the White House, though, it was the junior Secret Service guards who stole the show. Accompanying the president out of the side of the White House on his walk to the Eisenhower building, standing around while he was at the podium addressing the reporting polls, were 4 boys and girls wearing sunglasses and all dressed sharply in black. On occasion, looking side to side, one little boy even wore a communication earpiece. Now, the main task of the Secret Service is, of course, to provide protection to the president and the president's family. But the Secret Service was not established as a bodyguard unit. When founded in 1865, the Secret Service was created for the expressed purpose of snuffing out the counterfeiting in the nation's currency that had exploded during the Civil War. The nation's money supply, it was thought, was in need of protection, not the president. Note the date of its creation, 1865. April 14th, 1865 to be exact. In a twist of irony, President Lincoln signed the bill that created the Secret Service mere hours before he was assassinated. Be watchful and be alert. You do not know when the time will come. And after Lincoln, it took 2 more presidential assassinations, Garfield in 1881 and McKinley in 1901, before the nation assigned the president a specialized around-the-clock personal protection service. With counterfeiting now under control, that task fell to the Secret Service. The motto of the Secret Service is worthy of trust and confidence. Worthy of trust and confidence. The job requires that its agents always remain watchful and alert. In this gospel and in the readings that the church clusters around the beginning of Advent, Jesus urges us to do the same, to be watchful and to be alert. Now, I am not suggesting some corny parallel between us and the Secret Service, as if we are somehow God's Secret Service. That connection is far too hokey. What I would suggest, though, is that the season of Advent is losing its sense of vigilance, and we would do well to regain it. The Secret Service, even after it turned its focus away from preserving the value of money toward protecting life, the Secret Service has not always succeeded in its important task of warding off threats to the president's life. Many of you in this church have witnessed its lapses. Some of you can remember, probably quite vividly, where you were when you learned that President Kennedy had been shot. I'm not so young that I cannot remember Hinckley and Reagan. And still more of us might recall that odd situation less than 10 years ago when an unauthorized person somehow gained access to the podium right beside President Obama, where he pretended to provide a sign language translation of the president's words. That man didn't even know sign language, and he slipped right past the Secret Service without authorization to stand close enough to touch the president, something not even Hinckley or Oswald had achieved. The Secret Service has not always been watchful and alert. When it hasn't, its lapses have called into question whether it can be, as it claims, worthy of trust and confidence. What are your lapses? Where have you lapsed in your exercise of your life? They may be seemingly inconsequential, those lapses, guffaws, like the translator who didn't sign. Or they can be more deadly. This gospel reading is placed where it is to remind us that when we allow the Advent season to pass without taking stock of our lapses, we have forgotten its purpose. We have failed to be watchful and alert. Consider the Advent wreath. The Advent candles are not intended to be mere holiday decorations that accent a festive atmosphere. Rather, they are meant to be something like night lights. They are meant to be something like night lights that allow one to maintain some awareness against the darkness of ignorance. Many of you probably have night lights in a hallway, in a room. The Advent candles are meant to be something like that, and they are to become progressively stronger as we grow in the spirituality of the Christian life. At least that's the idea. As night lights, they help us avoid obstacles. And avoiding obstacles is one way to improve our vigilance. Now, I do hope that all of you have an Advent wreath in your homes that you light according to the pattern that the month unfolds. Religions throughout history and across the world have rituals that decorate their identity. Any religion that does not is far too bland to survive. We have several, and the Advent wreath is one, and its significance should not be minimized. Let me also offer two other suggestions for this Advent season to help you absorb the light that the Advent candles are meant to supply, if you let them. 1, intentionally make some gift to someone, perhaps anonymously, that cannot practically be returned. Intentionally make some gift to someone that cannot practically be returned. So much of the season has turned into a polite, conventional practice of exchange that the notion of beneficence is being silenced by the frenetic electricity of commerce. Now, I'm not one to rail against the commercialization of Christmas. I just don't want to see commerce crowd out charity and the notion of genuine gift be left suffocated. That's the first. The second is to do something uniquely prayerful for Advent, something unique in prayer. This could be praying some sort of prayer that you used to pray as a child that you have not said in years. It could be drawing for your parents, those of you who are children, a picture of what you learn in religious instructions here after Mass. It could be going to Mass on a day outside of Sunday, or even stopping in a church to say a prayer. Use your imagination. One of the reasons God gave you the freedom to use it is to be creative in how you communicate with God. Those of you who are parents, consider the delight watching your child's display of creativity gives you. God feels that same way about us. God does very much want to take his children to work, and not just one day in April. Despite the chic of the job, I don't know that I would want the stress of the Secret Service. Yet regardless of the task, God wants us to be watchful and alert for when he calls us into service, so that we are worthy of confidence and trust. Advent is that time. Advent is that time of making up for our lapses and preparing for whatever twists the future might hold.